Hello, and welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf with me, Samia Aziz. On this show, I interview incredible authors, doing a deep dive into important themes and issues while talking all things books. I really hope this week's episode helps you feel empowered, inspired, and uplifted. Today, my guest is the powerhouse, Sarah Joseph, who has been working in media and in the community for decades. Came to Islam as just a teenager, having moved away from the Catholic Church. She has been on a phenomenal journey with her faith, sharing with us all her experiences, insights, and reflections about faith, loving God, doing good, and justice. Sarah has been someone I have looked up to for a really long time, and I'm always so grateful for her guidance, support, and love. I'm so glad she's my guest today. Sarah Joseph is a globally renowned Muslim figure, respected for her innovative and independent thinking. She's a writer and broadcaster specialising in topics pertaining to faith, social change, the environment, and education. She was listed as one of the world's 500 most influential Muslims, one of Europe's most influential leaders under 40, and has an OBE from the Queen. A graduate of King's College and University College London, Sarah is an internationally recognised public speaker. In 2003, Sarah founded Amel, a brand which first created the concept and then detailed the progression of Muslim lifestyle. The brand fundamentally changed the way Muslims were marketed to and made Sarah an expert in contemporary Muslim consumers and ethics. Sarah has made countless media appearances, including for the BBC, CNN, and Al Jazeera. She has also appeared on the Doha debates, and she has written for international newspapers, including the UK's The Times and The Guardian, and scripted and recorded for a variety of BBC and independent radio productions. She has a regular slot on the BBC's most listened to radio station, the Zoe Ball Breakfast Show. Now, before we go on with today's episode with Sarah, I'm just going to tell you about the sponsors of this episode. Now, I know that when it comes to giving charity, it can feel a little overwhelming. There are so many charities to choose from, all seemingly doing amazing work. So who can you trust? For this episode, I've teamed up with Muslim Charity, a UK-based international charity inspired by Islamic values who have been serving and uplifting needy and vulnerable communities since 1999. Muslim Charity are focused on empowerment and creating opportunities for those in need, giving them the skills and resources to thrive, to create livelihoods, tackle hunger and thirst, and to break cycles of poverty. They work with honesty and integrity, transparency, reaching some of the world's most impoverished and remote locations, providing food, water, orphan care, education, and healthcare. They are swift and thorough during emergencies and disasters and stay behind long after, rebuilding communities. If you're looking for a charity you can trust, especially when it comes to your zakat and sadaqah, Muslim Charity is the one for you. Visit muslimcharity.org.uk/Samia to check out some of my favourite impactful projects. Assalamu alaikum, Sarah. Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf podcast. It's so lovely to have you here. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. I'm fine. I'm really good, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
I'm really excited to have you on the show. I can't wait to speak to you. You are one of the greats. You have done absolute, just years and decades of work, writing, journalism, community outreach, community work. You have been a pillar of the Muslim community in the UK for so long. Such service. So thank you, because I know personally you've been like a guiding light in my own life, and I'm so excited to be able to talk to you now and get like a conversation out in the world that's going to be there forever, inshallah. So thank you so much for being here. But how are you doing at the moment? Because, we are at time of recording, we're approaching Ramadan. We're in an absolute crazy time with everything going on around the world, but also at home in the UK. It's been difficult and challenging. How have you been, and how have you been coping?
Firstly thank you to all of your words, but really ultimately to to be able to do any work in the service of the one is the honor and privilege of the individual. And we just have to pray that Allah continues to bless us with the opportunity to do any work, whatever that work is. And one prays that we beneficiaries of that opportunity, because that's what it is. But as to how I am, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah in every state. And what I think I've learnt, and I've gone through my periods in my life of profound questioning and deep darkness about the world, because the world is a difficult place, but I think that is the nature of the world. These are the primordial truths, and they have ever been thus. And I don't think that that's going to change. The history of injustice in the world, and it's taken me a long time to get to this point of understanding, but this is the perennial situation, perennial battle between light and darkness in the world. And we have to try and be the light. But it has ever been thus. You go through history, you go through all of those times, you go through and we see it recorded as the history of suffering of so many peoples over time at the hands, whether it's Moses, whether it's Genghis Khan, whether it's the slave trade, whether it's the wiping out of Native America, the indigenous peoples of America, of Canada, of Australia. And you've seen the barbarism that has taken place, that Africa has had to suffer in all the world. So you see that over time. The history books tell us of these constant injustices. And so we have this now, and it's not going to go away until we reach paradise, because if it was perfect, we'd be in paradise. And so what is our role? And that's the question. What is our role? How do we bring light? How do we bring goodness? How do we not be sucked into the darkness, and make sure that the darkness doesn't become our teacher and our master? And it's very hard. It's very hard to keep your heart full of light when you're faced with this, but that is what we're called to do.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the biggest struggles at the moment, is it feels like we're drowning in darkness, as you so beautifully put it. And I think one of the difficult things is that, although what we're witnessing in Palestine, in the Congo, in Sudan, in Yemen, to name just a few places that are in turmoil at the moment, because the reality is that there are many more, we're also not supported. We're being like constantly gaslit, and our values are being tested, and we're being told that protesting is illegal and all of these kind of things. And we're living in countries, a lot of us, where our governments are legitimizing and actively supporting some of the horrors that are going on around the world. So I think not only is it the darkness of the images that are coming out that we are seeing and what's on our phones, it's that we are existing in a world that feels so complicit within that. And so I think like the grief and the anger and the despair and the fear is like so multi-layered, because it doesn't seem to be stopping right now. It's almost like an onion, and as we keep peeling, there's just more and more layers, like this never ending onion of just fear, and I think in despair and pain. And so what do you think are some of the things that we can do to channel that grief? Because I'll just speak to my own experiences over the last few months. I think the thing that has been giving me the most sort of courage is community, is trying to fall back into community, and just looking at the streets every single weekend since October, up and down the country and around the world, that have been full of people that have been standing up. But I also know that as people that are trying to do something, when it doesn't seem to be working in the way that you hope it does, and at least what you can see, because Allah has veiled everything anyway, at least what you can see is not working. It's also difficult. It's difficult. You feel like we've been on these streets for 6 months almost, and there's still no ceasefire at a minimum. So what do you think are some of the things that we can try to do to channel our grief and to process and to not get lost in that darkness?
So there's a lot there, Sonia. I suppose one thing I would say is that you described the layers of the onion, but also there's also been veils which have been shed, right? And I think even people who were not political, even people who were not engaged, even people that, and let's face it, these marches are ordinary men and women and children of all walks of life. Whether I go on those marches, the elderly man, white Englishman, white English woman coming with their little sandwiches and their flasks and their little backpacks as if they're going for a walk in the Cotswolds, and there they are on the streets. And you see the increasing size of the Jewish bloc, which in the beginning was a small bloc that every single march there has been a Jewish bloc, and that is growing in masses. Young people of every hue, where you see people with their purple hair and their blue hair and their rainbow hair, and and then you see Muslims, and and all sorts of ages, and banners of Pax Christi and Catholics, and who are all calling for peace. So this historic peace movement that I've been on marches since the 1980s. See a campaign for nuclear disarmament marches, anti-apartheid marches, environmental protests, and this has been going on in my entire lifetime. And you cannot. So a number of things. Firstly, I go back. This is a perennial situation. We will continually need to be in this situation where we are vigilant towards injustice of wherever it comes from, and wherever it's whoever is being persecuted. We must constantly be on the side of justice. Be just, even if it's against yourself. Be just, for justice is the closest to God consciousness. This is never a Muslim issue. This is about this. As me as a Muslim, of course, I'm drawing on my faith, but this particular issue is not a Muslim issue. So many issues are not Muslim issues. The peace and that calling are human beings who are calling to that, or human beings who are calling to militarism, and that is a huge battle. So it is. I continue to say it's not new, and you have to have patience, and you cannot see the end results. It is not for us to see the end results. It is for us to act, and it is up for the end results to be revealed. And they may not be revealed in our lifetime, but that doesn't stop us acting. 2, the fact that the veil has been lifted and ordinary people are seeing the complicity, which many people who have been active perhaps for 10, 20, 30, 40 years were more aware of. And now, hold on a minute, this hypocrisy, and I think it was particularly stark because of what happened just prior to with Ukraine, and the narratives and the discourse, and you're seeing literally parallels of behavior, or even worse, far more extreme. What are we at? 17,000 children dead now, something along like that. And it's awful to be comparing children's death tolls, but you've got this extreme situation, and all we can hear from our foreign secretary is that we're losing patience. Patience was lost 50 years ago, because this has been a 75-year-old issue. It should have been lost 75 years ago, quite frankly. And so the veil has been lifted. I've never seen, I have, in all of my lifetime, in all of my engagement, and I've been aware of the Palestinian situation for close to 40 years. Before I became a Muslim, I was an Irish Catholic teacher, history teacher, who told me about the situation. I've been aware of it since the early 80s. And it's just that recognition now that is really there in the mass public. So that should give us hope. And secondly, you can say we've been on the streets for 6 months now and nothing's happened, but we're still on the streets. No one's given up. And that should make us think, hold on a minute, we've galvanized, and it's increasing. It's not decreasing. It's not as if we started off with 500,000 and now we've only got 10,000. People are showing up week after week across the country. So again, should give us hope. And also now, I think, and what I believe we should be doing, is now starting to say, come on, what are the more strategic objectives? This is a lot of energy. How do we manage to utilize and bring together and direct that energy? We started with a few droplets, and that's grown, and it's now this sort of amazing waterfall of energy. And now I think, what does that do? How can we convert it into electricity, if you like? Hydropower type of thing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think you're right, because not only are the demonstrations still happening, they're getting bigger, and they're full of people from all walks of life. And we are, at time of recording, we're approaching Ramadan, and it's a time for a lot of inward reflection and introspection and worship and some quietness, I think, hopefully, for some of us anyway. What are some of the things that we can be doing more quietly as well to calm the heart? What are some of the things that we can be reflecting on? Because I think that as Muslims, I think it is really important, because although you're right in saying that this is not a Muslim issue, this has been going on for 75 years. I think to see our Muslim siblings being facing such injustice and such devastation and heartbreak, to be seeing all of that suffering happening to fellow Muslims, and at the same time being like hearing all the Islamophobic rhetoric from the West, I think it's impacting us on individual levels and as a community. So what do you think are some of the things that we can do this Ramadan, but also just generally moving forwards in terms of our spirituality and from that sense?
I do want to underline that in Palestine, it is not just happening to Muslims.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's really important that we don't forget that. It's really
Yeah.
important that we don't forget that the devastation is taking place to Palestinian Christian communities, which is probably the oldest Christian communities on the planet.
Yeah.
We have to give acknowledgement to that the Orthodox Church, which is the third oldest church, has been destroyed, that their churches are destroyed, that nuns were shot through sniper fire, that a Catholic woman and a Catholic woman and daughter were shot by sniper fire in Gaza when they went out to get outside their church. And the words of Reverend Gunther Ishaq, who is speaking from Bethlehem, and his Christmas sermon, and the work that he's been doing, and the fact that the churches, I cannot understand, but have not rallied behind the Palestinian Christians, needs to be acknowledged. And I would like to hope that as Muslims, that regardless of who this was happening to, whether it was happening to any race, any religion, we would stand in solidarity against this,
Absolutely.
quite frankly, this barbarism. And I want to just realign and reaffirm those points. In relation to Ramadan, Ramadan is a time of fasting for sure, which is meant, as the Quran describes, fasting is nothing new. It's actually also taking place in the time of Lent this year in particular. But fasting is nothing new. It was prescribed for us as it was prescribed for those before us. And it is that we increase in God consciousness. And this world is going to break your heart. There's a French writer, he wrote this, your heart must break or turn as hard as iron. And I always reflect on that. And our heart will break and break. And Rumi, I think, said that the break is where the heart will keep breaking. You have to keep breaking your heart until you understand and are conscious of the one. And it was Rumi who says that the break is where the light enters. This idea of brokenheartedness, and I think many of us are heartbroken, because to see human beings, the images I've seen, I will never unsee.
Yeah.
None of us we will never unsee Sidra. We will never unhear the cries of little Hibba. We will never unsee the young man with the plastic around the tag around his wrist, and that has been stripped of absolutely everything by the tank. We will never unsee those images. And we are brokenhearted. I'm brokenhearted that other human beings could do this to people. But to speak to your point pertaining to the quietness, the stillness, this is what the 5 pillars are. This is what worship is. Worship, the practice of worship, if we do it really consistently, brings us resilience. It's for ourselves. God gains nothing from our worship. God is unchanged. This is all for us. This is to build us, to build our spiritual muscle, to build our muscle of resilience, to still our heart, to bring us peace. And I would say to people, really try and connect with God, with the one, the merciful, the uncaused cause of all creation. Really try and connect with the one this Ramadan. Ramadan is the month of fasting to bring us closer to him. Ramadan is the month of Quran. So read Quran, read it in translation. Get a simple translation and read it from cover to cover. Read it again. listen to it, try and have it on in the background so that that's just permeating your consciousness, your subconsciousness, so it's just there. Read, if you're finding difficulty in the Arabic to read it, just really just try and spend some time to improve it, embrace, go reflect on all of the verses that you know, learn the meanings, and go through the tafsir of Surah Al-Fatiha, so that when you recite that minimum 17 times a day within your prayers, you're there really understanding what it means when Allah says, Iyak, and only you do we worship and only you do we ask for help. What does that mean? It means that for sure we protest, we demand of our governments that they, but ultimately we have to ask of God, because only He do we worship and only Him do we ask for help. He is our sustainer. He is the one who is sufficient for us. And when you look at the faith of the young Palestinians, and I don't want to glamorize that, because sometimes we seem to think, oh, we put these videos out and we see these videos of young children, quite frankly, have just literally lost their mothers, their fathers, saying, Allah is sufficient for us. And I'm just looking at them and I'm thinking to myself, but they should not have to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I'm in awe of their faith, in awe of the way they respond, but they should not have to go through that. And I think sometimes I find that slightly voyeuristic, and I despise that element of it all, whilst at the same time watching little Mariam, who's reading the Quran every 6 days in a state of war. So just reflect on that. Just reflect on how we can be more. We can carve out time. And we need to. We need to have a deep relationship. The pillars of Islam are these embodied experiences, whether it is the embodied experience of fasting, whether it's giving up and having food and drink and being hungry, whether it's the embodied experience of being on the of Hajj or Umrah and the going around in the tawaf, the feeling of the people, the sounds. It's whether it's the embodied experience of having to give of one's money. These are and of prayer, of course, which is an incredibly physical experience. Just recognizing that we are these spiritual beings having this human experience, to quote Shardine. As we're having this human experience, this human world is frail and imperfect and actually catastrophic, as the angels said. Why are you going to create something that's going to create fitna and mischief and bloodshed? And Allah says, I know that which you know not. So understand that there is purpose to all of this. I don't understand this purpose. I have no idea. It makes no sense to me. But understand that there is purpose, there is divine purpose, that we ourselves need to train ourselves to be resilient and get up for tahajjud. You're going to be getting up for food, get up for that little bit extra for tahajjud. Pray, talk to God, ask God for the help in the world, to bring justice in this world, for there to be balance restored, and to really see this time as transformative for one's own soul.
We're just going to take a small break here to talk about the sponsors of today's episode, Muslim Charity. Since 1999, driven by Islamic faith and values, Muslim Charity have been delivering life-changing projects for communities living in poverty. They work with honesty, integrity, and determination, supporting some of the world's most under-recognized, vulnerable, and isolated communities. As well as providing aid and support during emergencies and disasters, they focus on long-term development of families and communities looking to bring an end to hunger, thirst, and poverty. They work with groups of people often marginalised, including homeless community in the UK, children born in brothels, street children, children and adults with disabilities, the elderly, and orphans. To find out more about their work, visit muslimcharity.org.uk/Samia and see some of my favourite projects, especially as you consider where to give your precious zakat and sadaqah. That's muslimcharity.org.uk/Samia, SAMIA. I wanted to thank you actually for speaking about the Christian community in Palestine that have also been completely, I don't know what the right word is, attacked and decimated in this moment, because abandoned by the world, I think, actually,
by their own church, abandoned by their own church.
Exactly, for sure. And I think a lot of us, when we say this is not a Muslim issue, we say, yeah, because there are Christians in Palestine and there are also Jewish Palestinians too. But I don't know how many of us have really sat with exactly what is going on at the moment to the Christian community in Palestine, because actually I remember reading something not that long ago that has basically said like that the situation is so severe because of the number of people that they were, that there's just not going to be anybody left, which is, it completely blows my mind to think that an entire community, an entire faith group in a place has just been completely lost, has been killed, like there's been murder, and own and their churches around the world, as you've said, have not rallied, have not cried out, have not put pressure, when there's such huge institutions. And this leads on to my next question, actually, because I think although there is, pain and there's disbelief and there's like a lot of anger and frustration, I think a lot of it is driven by an understanding and awareness of justice, like a call that these are all calls for justice of the people that are impacted anywhere around the world. It's always about justice, that this thing that is happening is unjust. And the Quran is also massively big on justice, right? Islam is huge on justice. It is a core value of our Islamic faith. But it's also a universal value. So what are some of the things that you think we can do to understand justice a little bit better? And when we talk about it, what do we really mean?
I think we can't just give it lip service.
Yeah.
Oh, justice. Justice is something that needs constant work. This is something that needs constant protection. Justice is blind. Under the Old Bailey, you have the scales. She's holding the scales of justice in one hand. She
Mm,
is blindfolded because justice should be blind, and she holds a sword in the other because justice also requires that there be power to implement justice.
mm, mm,
And all of these elements are necessary. And
mm,
we have to understand them and work on each of those elements. Justice is blind, and in the Quran we say, be just even if it be against yourself as well. That it's is not that striving for justice is not, well, I've got to get the better of it. That's not
mm,
justice. That's why
mm,
justice is a scale. It's creating balance. And Islam is also deeply reflective of balance. And it says in the Quran, we have created you a middle nation, a balanced nation, to act as witnesses unto mankind, and the Prophet to act as a witness unto you. Justice is also about balance. And I've been trying to reflect on this because on the one side at the moment there is this extremism, barbarous extremism that is seeking to displace people, that is seeking to displace Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Muslims, and anyone who speaks out in
mm,
that territory, actually. It is seeking to cleanse the land and to install a single ethno religious grouping. And it is doing so in the most horrifying manner for all the world to witness. And yet, and I think that this is also, which the Quran speaks to, the covering of it. And also,
mm,
as if people are veiled, they're completely veiled to the truth. You're
mm,
literally seeing videos online on the social media, and still, even in this horror, you'll see underneath, yeah, but,
mm,
or Pallywood.
mm,
It'll be dismissed, even though it's still there. Think of the levels of veiling that must be before someone's eyes, that they are seeing the image of a dead, shredded child, and still their hearts are not open. What does
mm,
that tell you about hearts and the level of veils that are upon those hearts? And so justice is constantly, you cannot stop speaking about it.
mm,
You cannot stop examining your own heart. And I think this is really important because what we're seeing is people hidden behind veils of ignominy, veils of barbarism, veils of self lying,
mm,
actually. Self lying. You cannot be any person of conscience and see what's happening and come to the point where you are 50-50 on this. There's
yeah,
no way. There's no way. You cannot be a person of conscience and not come to the point where you're calling this out. So then we ourselves have to make sure that we protect our hearts, that our
Mm.
hearts do not become hardened, that our hearts are filled with hatred. No, we cannot do that. The darkness cannot be our teacher. And so we constantly have to be looking to the light, to the nur of Allah. We have to be looking to the justice of Allah. And we have to be saying, even if it be against ourselves, we must be just. And these are difficult things, but we remember this because it's the closest thing to God consciousness. So if we want to be close to God, if we say to ourselves that we are people who remember God, acknowledge God, we're the people that hold fast to God, then we have to hold fast to justice, even if it be against ourselves, and to
Mm.
remember that we are a middle nation.
Struggle with, and I have been reflecting on as well, is that justice is huge. It's not just one thing. But I think I speak for myself first. I think we are so limited in how we look at something. We're obsessed with definitions, we're obsessed with outcomes. If something is just, then this happens. If something is unjust, then this is what it means. But actually, I think this is so much than anything we can ever comprehend. And part of justice, part of believing in true justice is also believing that Allah is always just, even if we can't see it, and even if we won't see it in our lifetimes, even if we won't see it in this dunya, that there will always be justice. And I find that in many ways, to know that this is horrible and we will act justly and we will do whatever we can. And even if it doesn't result in the things that I think are just in this world, it will eventually, there will be justice. There has to be justice. There's just no two ways about it. There has to be justice and there has to be liberation. Whether or not I see it, whether or not I'm part of it is irrelevant. But that is also easy to hold on to when everything is in your face constantly. And I think we feel responsible to a degree, and and I think as well, like, that just when you look around the world, I'm constantly in a state of, you get whiplash in lots of ways, because the stark reality, or not the reality, the inequality of the world is so prevalent. I work in the charity sector, and this is something I deal with every single day. I'm reading reports of starvation and famine, and then I'm a very wholesome meal that I've cooked myself, that I've gone and I've bought the ingredients for very easily, alhamdulillah. But living with that inequality is also very difficult. And I think there comes guilt with that as well. So how do we reconcile this sort of guilt and responsibility we have with the idea that actually, regardless of what we believe justice is, and regardless of whether or not we're going to see it, there will ultimately be justice? How do we reconcile these two things? Because they feel like they don't really go together.
I mean, speaking to the first point of just ultimate justice, I think it's important to remember that and to hold on to that. I remember putting out a tweet in 2021. If I didn't believe in a day of judgment, I couldn't go on in this world. I don't think I could go
Mm.
on in this world. I really meant that at the time. And it was one of those tweets that sort of really gained momentum because I think it spoke to what people were feeling at the time. And that was obviously the situation in Sheikh Jarrah and what was going on in 2021. This is an ongoing situation. But if I didn't believe in a day of judgment, if I didn't believe that there would be ultimate justice, it would be very hard to manage to cope. But speaking to the guilt and that feeling, and that I think it's also impotence, that feeling of
Mm.
impotence that really gets you. And I've come to the point where I think people want you to believe you're impotent, but actually we're not. And there is always something which can be done. And I don't mean just assuaging your guilt with, sometimes you go past somebody and you put pound in their pot as an assuaging of guilt. But no, it has to go deeper than that. We can't, guilt is a very emotion.
Mm.
And actually, I think Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives us a way out of that emotion constantly. And it's important to recognize that because I think guilt is a corrosive emotion that is used against us and it whispers into you and eats at you. But actually, there's always redemption. You're never too far gone. You're never
Mm.
too far gone. And it is Iblis whose name is rooted in Ablasa because he despairs of God's redemption. We're never too far gone. And we can always return. And the Quran is, and it's never a point, it's a form of shirk in a way to say that God won't forgive us.
Mm.
Because actually, if we're constantly aware that we have a Lord who has the right to punish us for our wrongdoing, but also the
Mm.
capacity to forgive. As the
Mm.
Hadith Qudsi says, do what you wish, for I've forgiven you. But it's this. So what I'm trying to say is, don't be consumed by guilt. Constantly becoming and returning to Allah, to seeking Allah's mercy, forgiveness, and also to seeking His guidance on what you can do, and recognize that all power belongs to Allah. There is
Mm.
nothing that happens on this earth that Allah hasn't given permission for. And that's
Mm.
really hard, because then you're like, well, I'm supposed to believe in a loving God, and God is allowing all of this. Yes, yes, Allah is allowing all of this. Is allowing all of that. And that is really hard to come to terms with. But when you understand the transience of this world and the
Mm.
overarching belief in a hereafter that is absolutely just, and not an atom's weight of good and not an atom's weight of bad will be missed from it, from the record, then you see yourself and see your own as a sort of, it's a journey. And this is not, this life of this world is but a pastime and a sport, but it has a purpose. The home of the hereafter, that is life if we but knew, but still there is purpose. We've not been created for mere sport. We're not
Mm.
like this Greco-Roman humans being played with for the amusement of the gods. That's not what this is about. This is about our journey, our purification, our improvement, our self-development, if you like. And as for feeling guilty, just recognizing what you can do, not just about the situation in Palestine, although obviously that is ever present to us at the moment, but there are people on the streets of the cities that we live in Britain today who are hungry. We're seeing children and we see reports coming out of children in Britain who are going to bed hungry. We see
Yeah.
reports of children who are dying in sheltered accommodation because various reasons. We see of the level of homelessness, over 1 million homeless children in this country, in Britain, the fifth or sixth richest country in the world. So there's an
Mm.
awful lot of injustice on our doorstep that we can be
Mm.
speaking to, that we can be engaging with. And I do believe that this is our responsibility. And I speak as a Briton, and I speak as a Briton living here. I'm not an expat. I haven't moved out. I'm here. This is my home, my people, and God has chosen to place me here, as He chose Yusuf alayhi salam to be placed in Egypt. And Yusuf didn't abandon the people of Egypt and say, well, actually, I'm interested only in the people of Canaan, my people. No, He said,
Mm.
absolutely, I will use my skills, my means to bring justice, to bring goodness, to bring balance, to bring harmony to the place where I am. And I truly believe that we should be a people of service to the people of Britain, to speak to the poor, the needy, the weak, and the oppressed in as our neighbours who are hungry, and
Mm.
making sure that whatever we can do, whatever skills that we have as individuals, are used for the benefit of humanity. And we all have our skills. Every single one of us has different skills. And
Mm.
it's like we are a key, and our key is unique, and our key unlocks particular doors. And
Mm.
we've got to understand our purpose.
Yeah.
So whatever our skills are, and use them for the good. In the Bible, and it's called the Golden Rule, and it's demonstrated throughout all religious traditions that I can see, and within Islam as well. But it's put in the Bible in a beautiful way, and it's what I grew up with: to love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. You can see it within Islam, to love God and thereafter be upright, to love God and thereafter to do good deeds, to have faith and thereafter to act in goodness. All of these constant refrains within the Quran. And these are
Mm.
the two wings by which the soul must exist in this earth. The human
Mm.
being must exist, to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself, to really understand the crying pain of fellow human beings, and not just human beings, but the ecosystem, the nature on which we depend, and which we
Mm.
are so brutal towards ourselves.
Mm.
So we have to also understand that how we are participating in brutality to our planet, in the way we consume, and this ever needy, hungry consumption. So guilt is an ineffectual emotion, right? Do not let it consume you. You seek
Yeah.
repentance, And then what you're trying to do is say, and then what can I do? And how
Yeah.
can I act? And what can
Yeah.
I do to restore balance? And how can I bring justice? And how can I be of service?
Yeah. Because I think although grief can be like debilitating and all consuming, I agree. I think it is the most useless of all feelings and emotions and experiences, because it is the thing that can take you away from doing the thing that you need to do and doing the good thing. And I saw a video just recently where a Palestinian woman was saying, your guilt makes you a liability and not an ally, because it is the thing that then makes us as Palestinians and as allies trying to make you feel better rather than dealing with our own things and focusing on the cause. And I thought that was so powerful and insanely true. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't feel guilt and that it's not understandable that we do feel guilt, but we have power over what we do with it and how much we allow it to consume us. I think that's the thing to focus on. It's not a bad thing to feel those things, because that's about empathy and compassion and all of the good things that make us human and make us connected to other people and the ecosystem. But we are in control of what we do with it and where we sit with it. And fundamentally, that is the thing that we can hand over to God, because if we are in conversation with him and we are in relationship with Allah, we can hand over our guilt, we can talk about it and let it out, and ask for the strength to turn that into power and to turn that into action and turn that into goodness. You, Sarah, like you've spoken many a time really beautifully about submitting to God. It is you spoke when I was at university. It was the first time I'd heard you speak about the act of sujood. And that has stayed with me. It has been years, it's been over 10 years. It has stayed with me. The very act of laying your head down on the ground is pure submission. To physically submit your entire body to God and say, I give everything. I'm handing over everything to you. Allah, manage my affairs, manage the state of my heart, help me. Because I think right now, that is one of the few things that can bring us the peace that we need. And I wondered if you could just speak to that idea of submitting to God and what that means.
It is what we're called to do. To self-surrender unto God is the calling. And believe me, I appreciate how hard it is. There's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu to have faith in God and tie up your camel. And I'm
Mm.
very much a tie up my camel type of person. I want to tie it. I'm going to tie it with every type of slip and full knot, and that camel ain't ever going to get out of it, of the ropes I'm tying it up with. I'm be prepared. I'm Girl Scout type of lists of things which need to be done and to seeking how I've got to do it for sure. And handing things over to God, wow. Letting it sit with God, letting it be with God, it's hard. But to self surrender unto God, to say, here I am, O Lord, at your service. What we say when we go to or Hajj, here I am, O Lord, at your service. It is incredibly empowering to submit. It is incredibly empowering to submit, to surrender yourself to the one who created you, the one who knows you, the one who wants the best for you, the one who wants to purify your heart and for you to your maqam to be raised, your status to be raised, who wants nothing but the best for you. You are going to be given the lessons that are perfect for you, the tests which are perfect for you. It's going to be like we talk about AI adaptive learning, where the machine gives you the perfect exercise based upon this is AI adaptive learning to the nth degree of perfection. We're going to be tested exactly how we need to be tested. And we surrender and say, yes, for me, and I do tell that story for me, when I was on my journey towards Islam, when I was on my journey seeking where my faith journey and trying to seek God, and in a way have intellectually come to Islam, but actually it was seeing a girl go into prostration and seeing her head to the floor, where I recognized that Islam meant to self surrender yourself unto God and to completely give of your this bodily form. In Catholicism, the sacrament is called an outward sign of inward grace, and the sujood really is the ultimate outward sign of self-surrender unto God. Just to speak of prayer, to recognize that prayer is a really embodied experience, to take your time. And if I can recommend during Ramadan or wherever, whatever point in time that the audience may be listening to this, I can really recommend to just take your time in prayer, to stand and to just feel that standing, to center yourself, to have a moment, and then to recite, and to recite the words with knowledge and understand meaning, and then to go into ruku and recognize that when you're in ruku, what you're saying, and then to stand again. And then as you go into prostration, to recognize that as the ultimate act of support, but to really feel it in your body and feel the letting go. Feel the letting go, and to continue on, two rakat, two rakat, two rakat, until you can feel the letting go.
That's very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that again. Very beautiful. And I really hope I hope for myself that I do find the letting go more easy, and that all of us find it more easy and find that ultimate peace, because I think that ultimate peace lies with Allah. It's not going to be in this dunya. And Allah has told us that time and time again, that it's not going to be in this dunya. This dunya is not a place of peace. And actually, if we find it to be a place of peace, that is an indication that there is something wrong with our hearts. There is something wrong with us. We should not be finding this a place of peace. So alhamdulillah for all the turmoil. Hopefully, inshallah, it is a good sign, and may Allah accept it and reward us for it.
But you can have peace in the acceptance that this
Yes.
dunya is imperfect. You can come to terms with. And it is about, there is sakina, there is peace in the understanding and acceptance that Allah is the one, and in His hands the world resides.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you have done a huge amount of work in the UK over the last few decades. A huge amount of work in community, with writing, through Amal Lifestyle Magazine, through, as a journalist, you do BBC Pause for Thought, Radio 2, BBC Radio 2, and you connect with a lot of people over the years you have. What are some of the things that you've learned about the Muslim community, some of the challenges we face, but also some of our strengths and power, basically hopes for the future?
I'm so incredibly hopeful for the Muslim
Mm.
community in Britain, around the world. I really am. And I know we focus and our weaknesses and our problems, and for sure there are many. But I've been doing a piece of work recently where we've been having roundtables and discussions and just looking at what are the opportunities and challenges. And what I see is that the opportunities and challenges are almost entirely the same things on both lists. And you're like, how's
Wow.
that possible? But you think to yourself, right? We're such a young population. Muslims, it's almost 4 million of us now, and our average age is 27, which means that is a
Very
huge youth population. And that is a huge challenge. That
mm.
means young people still developing, still having to go through all of the complexities of being a young person, of the complexities of being a young person in a world of social media and inequalities, and with the pressures that this is the first generation really that will be worse off than their parents' generation. They aren't guaranteed home ownership or a job for life, or knowing that their pensions going, and a degradation of public services. There can be tremendous despair amongst young people. So in a way you can say, well, that's a challenge, but it's also this huge opportunity. This is a youthful population that's got energy. And believe me when I say this, if you are a young person, you know this, you will never ever understand how much energy you have and how hard it is when the Prophet ﷺ says, take from your youth before your old age. Really, there's no joke. Take from your health before your ill health. Take from your wealth before your poverty, to your life before your death, etc. Your free time before your busy time. Really, that youth before your old age. You have other skills as you get older, but that huge amount of energy. I could work 72 hours without sleep beforehand, just little 15-minute cat naps, no more. So this vibrancy of youth that we have, It's a challenge and an opportunity. We look at our mosques, and I know many of us grumble about our mosques and the facilities that are there, and whether there's access for women, whether there's access for our young people. But look at the fact that we have so many mosques. Look at the fact that I will go to Jummah prayers on a Friday in Central Mosque, and there's 10,000 people there. You go to East End and you're looking at sort of 20,000 people. The fact is that we'll be praying on top of each other's heads, literally, when it comes to Ramadan and Taraweeh and the 27th night. But every week on a Friday, there are people, you can go into my mosque, the mosque I go to, on a sort of midweek Asr, and you'll still see 4 full rows. That is amazing. Do not underestimate the power of that. Do not underestimate how amazing that is. And if the mosques themselves can be we can think about how we resource for outreach work, resource for youth work, resource for the work of our elders, because we also, whilst we are fundamentally a youthful population, we do have to think about our elders. We have to think about, and we've got to think about solutions that are intrinsically Islamic, and that does not mean an old people's home which sells halal food and which provides halal food, and we have Bismillah over the door and a little bit of Quran going on. Actually, there has to be an intrinsic intergenerational solution between our elders and our nursery, and you look at the intergenerational examples of work that have gone on through. You see it in the Nordic countries, you see it across Europe, where there really are exceptional projects which are historically normalized within villages, for example. That would have been normal to have intergenerational experiences and living, but in our sort of broken family structures, which are the challenge, then we also have these solutions, the potential solutions. And I think when I had the good fortune to be in Umrah fairly recently, and you're in Medina and you see 1 million people going 5 times a day, and you're like, yeah, it's 1 million people in Medina. Yeah, we know. Okay, so I imagine you live near a football stadium. I live near a football stadium. It's got almost 90,000 capacity in my football stadium. The sheer scale of getting 90,000 people in and 90,000 people out for one football match or for one concert in a day, 5 times a day, you've got 1 million people coming in and 1 million people coming out and 1 million people coming in and 1 million people coming out. And that happens 5 times a day. And the order, so we think to ourselves, oh, we're chaotic, we're disorganized. No, we understand order. And we've got no leadership. Muslims don't know how to follow. Hold on a minute. You've got one man, and that man says Allahu Akbar, and 1 million people go down into ruku. And that person says something like, and we stand up and says, Allahu Akbar, and we go down into prostration. We know, we are organized, we are disciplined. You've got 1.5 billion people, there's 2 billion Muslims in the world. Almost all of them, except for the elderly, the young and the sick, but virtually all of them are going to be fasting. Understand that power. You had somebody who's on the far right in Israel saying, we've got to stop being afraid of Ramadan. What does that tell you? They're afraid of Ramadan, right? They're afraid of Ramadan. Of course they're afraid of Ramadan. This is 2 billion people. That's 1 in 4 of the population who turns around and says, yeah, we're giving up food for a month. We're giving up drinking water during the day for a month. We're giving up smoking. We're giving up watching dross on television. And all of our vices, we're going to really try and give those up for a month. And they can't, just understand that power for a minute. When we take it for granted, just understand that power for a minute. That discipline, and then you say, okay, let's just extend that discipline. We're going to just stop buying stuff that's unethical. We can stop eating. We can stop buying stuff that's unethical. It's no stop. Yeah. We can stop. If we can stop drinking, if we can stop doing everything of a calling the human body for an entire month, and we do it every single year, we can manage to do all sorts. We can say, yeah, this consumer business, not for us. And so I have enormous hope. I have thought of our youth, of a talent pool in Britain. I've been a Muslim 35, 36 years, right? The talent pool that I see that has grown up in everything, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in law, whether it's in arts and culture, whether it's in architecture, the talent pool is enormous, mashallah, huge, and at scale and at numbers. To see the resources that we have, we are an incredibly deprived community in Britain today and globally, for sure, right? We have some of the worst health statistics, the worst housing statistics. But also, we have the fastest growing middle class in the country. We have the fastest growing aspects of social mobility in the country. And we have ultimately people who are resourced that we've never seen in my 35, 36 years of being a Muslim. We've never seen the like thereof of local Muslims and their resources. It just now needs to be strategically directed. Or it's like you've got all of the rest, the ingredients for success. You've got youth, you've got talent, you've got infrastructure, you've got discipline. We just need a little bit of a strategy. We need some R&D, some research and development, and working out where is the strategic moves. But I am so hopeful. We just have to recognize our own power and step into our power. And power comes from the Latin potere, to be able to, right? So you just got to ask yourself, what am I able to do? What am I able to do? I'm able to stop purchasing from unethical places that harm the environment, and start looking. I can direct my pension to ethical sources that aren't invested in the arms trade, that aren't invested in pornography, that aren't invested in child labor. I can purchase clothing that isn't supporting child labor, that isn't supporting pollution in Bangladesh or Indonesia. I can do that. I have that power and I have that discipline, because if I can manage to give up food and drink for an entire 30 days, I can manage to say, yeah, I don't need that. And then we have our institutions. And so you actually have huge amounts of infrastructure which can bring people into place and space. And our youth. So we've got so much. We should be incredibly hopeful and just a little bit strategic.
Oh my gosh, I was smiling a lot as you were talking because I have never had it said so plainly and put forward like that. And actually, I look at people I know and I look at myself, and we can be so ridiculously lazy. And part of the almost like the concerns about whether or not boycott will be sustained, again, is just about laziness. It's about, are our people going to keep boycotting McDonald's? Are they going to stop drinking Coke for forever? And I've been very frustrated with that because I just feel like you have so many other options. Regardless of anything else, you have so many other options. You don't need to go to McDonald's, and it's not even halal anyway. But you just said so beautifully, if we can go 30 days without food and drink and other things from dawn till dusk, that is a huge thing. And I think because so many of us with Ramadan are often just on autopilot, we just do it. It's what we've been doing our whole lives. But I think actually to just sit with it, especially we did it in June on the longest day of the year. For several years, June, the longest day of the year, came in the month of Ramadan.
Yeah.
We had 18 hours when it was also quite warm and no food and drink for 30 days in a row. To sit with actually how amazing that is. And that wasn't just one person doing it. As you said, there was over a billion people most likely doing that. I feel like I'm like tingly because I just feel like there is so much power in that. And it's very empowering to think that, especially when Rishi Sunak recently said that Sadiq Khan is controlled by he's making his party is making all these Islamophobic statements. They're trying to ban protests. They're trying to do all kinds of stuff. The war on terror has been going on for decades, and people that look like me and dress like you, Sarah, were targeted all the time. But to hold on to your power, I think, in this time is massive. So thank you so much. I really hope that people will hold on to that, because I think that is important. It's really important. And as this is a podcast that's actually supposed to be about books and literature, and we haven't spoken about writing at all, but you have done a huge amount of writing, and you still do, I believe, in many ways. And I just, as we end, if you can talk a little bit about the power of words and the power of writing and what writing has been for you over the years.
Oh, so Bible says in the beginning there was the word. And the Quran begins with Ikra. Read what?
Mm.
Words. The power of words. The power to heal, the power to harm, the power to enlighten and make people laugh, the power to make people cry, the power to inspire, the power to belittle. And that there's that lie that I always reflect when we tell our children, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It's such a giant lie, because words can hurt so much and can reduce the soul. Words are a form of power, and we should understand that and choose our words wisely and see that we can use our words for good and recognize that our words are powerful and recognize that we ourselves can have voice in whatever form. And today we're offered so many forms, whether that's a short tweet or an Instagram reel or a Facebook live or a YouTube video or a podcast or a book. All of these are words manifesting thoughts and ideas. And yeah, for sure, I still enjoy words brought together, edited beautifully into the forms of a book, constructed and presented in a very tangible, analog, real format feel. But words are widely used and available now. So how we deal with all of those different media that are accessible to us is to recognize again the opportunity of them, to choose our words wisely, to increase ourselves in wisdom so that we can deliver better words, to be inspired and to seek inspiration so that we can inspire, to grow ourselves so that we can teach, and to see words for the strength they are. And of course, the most beautiful words are the words in the Quran from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to really enjoy them, to enjoy their rhythmic, melodious, harmonious recitation, because the Quran was revealed in that way, and to see the pulse of it, which is extraordinary. And to then try and understand the etymology of those words, the roots of each of those words, because we have an Arabic language that is based upon the tricontinental root system, to see the power of that and the immediacy and the depth and the strength of that, and then to also benefit from the understanding and the translations and attempts at understanding the meanings of Quran from the many different people of knowledge who have translated it into for me, my native tongue, which is English, and the other translations, whatever your native tongue is, to really try and wrangle with those, but to understand the power of words and enjoy them and to use them and choose them wisely.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so beautiful, Sarah. And thank you for all of your words today and always. It has been such a privilege speaking to you on the podcast today. Thank you so much.
An absolute privilege to be here and a pleasure. And it's so wonderful to see you doing this and to having the energy to carve out this space and to having the discipline to carve out the space and making sure that putting it out there, because that's the other thing, to just be consistent with what we do. In the beginning, we may not feel and see that they were getting any benefit, but just to keep doing something and to keep creating and to keep putting out there, that is incredibly powerful. And all power to your elbow in this, and may it be a blessing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow and subscribe to the Diverse Bookshelf podcast on your chosen podcast platform and connect with me on social media. I'd really appreciate it if you could rate and leave a review, as it helps more people find the show. Today's episode was brought to you by Muslim Charity, a faith-based international charity working around the world to tackle poverty, hunger and thirst. They deliver your zakat and sadaqah with honesty and transparency, reaching those in need with impactful projects all year round. Muslim Charity provide vulnerable communities with life-saving healthcare, clean water, food, livelihood opportunities, and education, helping everyone to thrive. If you're looking for a charity you can trust, especially when it comes to your zakat and sadaqah, Muslim Charity is the one for you. Visit muslimcharity.org.uk/Samia to check out some of my favourite impactful projects. That's muslimcharity.org.uk/Samia, SAMIA.